Okay, so the piece we're looking at today it's this incredibly intense, radical philosophical essay.
Hmm.
And it basically posits that all religion is fundamentally just a justification for economic exploitation.
Rooted in that shift from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic, from abundance to scarcity and work.
Exactly. So let's just dive right in. The first major point is about the very foundation of the argument.
Right.
The entire sweeping condemnation of religion, it really hinges completely on the historical reality of this Paleolithic age of abundance.
It's the absolute linchpin, isn't it?
It is.
Because if the reader doesn't fully buy into that initial concept, this idea of a pre-agricultural leisure society,
This cocaine country idea.
yeah, then the whole critique of civilization that follows just, well, it falls apart.
And that's really the weakness we see here. For a reader who isn't already familiar with this kind of, radical thought.
Surazan or Salins, for example.
Right. For them, this Paleolithic freedom can sound, well, a bit like a romantic myth,
More like a utopian fantasy than documented history. Yeah, and that's a huge vulnerability.
It is. The whole thing could just get dismissed as nostalgia, instead of the rigorous analysis it's meant to be.
So the suggestion here is critical? You have to dedicate some real, tactical space to transforming that anthropological evidence.
It can't just be a supporting citation.
No, it has to become the central defensive shield for the whole argument. You have to preemptively just neutralize that old assumption.
That life before agriculture was all nasty, brutish, and short.
Exactly. You have to make the evidence for abundance feel completely irrefutable.
So how do we actually do that? How do we put some muscle on it?
Well, with concrete examples that really jolt the reader out of their preconceptions.
Right. So instead of just citing a theory, you bring the Hadza data right to the forefront.
The Tanzanian hunter-gatherers, yeah.
The fact that they spend, less than 2 hours a day on average finding food?
And the rest of the time is leisure. Playing, gossiping, sleeping. It's quantifiable data that just shatters the societal myth of constant struggle.
It really does.
And you have to pair that with the archaeological evidence. I mean, the stuff that speaks to the social reality.
The skeletons.
The skeletons. You have to use the findings about the Uromagnadian, the Magdalenian skeletons, the striking lack of trauma and violence in Uromagnadian and Magdalenian skeletons.
From the Upper Paleolithic.
Right.
And you contrast that directly with the kind of injuries you see all the time in the later settled Neolithic burials.
And that just directly proves the claim that this pre-exploitation era had a genuine, absence of wars, massacres, and destruction.
It makes it physical, real.
And then, to really tie it all back to the main theme of religion, you have to highlight the contrast.
Between what?
Between the simplicity of that old Paleolithic religio, that symbiotic everything-is-connected consciousness, and the complication of institutional religion that comes later.
Right, with its hierarchies and guilt cycles.
Exactly.
You show that the complicated version wasn't a spiritual evolution. It was an economic necessity, a mechanism to control labor.
So it wasn't inevitable, it was required by the new material conditions.
Stronger foundation. Okay, so let's shift to the second major critique, which is more about the structure of the essay itself.
Yeah, the flow. The essay has this incredible destructive energy. It's relentless.
It really is.
But while that recursive, polemical style keeps the energy high, it needs a clearer structural path to guide the reader.
A path from planeo fugito historialgati.
From the historical roots to the present day.
Right. From religious inhumanity to its modern form in neocapitalism.
And right now it feels like the core thesis gets revisited in a few different chapters. You have the gods of labor, then sacrifice, then exchange.
It's dense. Very dense. And when you combine that with the condemnation of, pretty much every other system in it.
Jacobinism, Stalinism, democracy, everything gets hit.
Yeah.
You risk just overwhelming the reader before they even get to the crucial part.
The return of the celestial economy, parasitic capitalism.
And that's the weakness. The current structure feels less like a continuous, escalating argument.
And more like a series of related, very powerful essays.
Yeah, the reader might feel like they're cycling through the same point, just with different historical examples. We need to build more momentum.
We need a narrative highway that leads straight to 2024.
Exactly.
So the suggestion is to streamline those middle sections, create a sharper, unmistakable transition,
Okay, so moving from what, the historical, agricultural forms of religion?
which were still mediated by tangible things, rituals, sacrifices of animals or goods.
To the fully abstract modern form, the god of abstract exchange.
Money itself.
Money. Right.
And if you structure it that way, it emphasizes that today's financial system isn't something new. It's just the purest, most refined essence of that original Neolithic exploitation.
But now it's totally stripped bare. It doesn't even have the ritualistic pretense anymore.
Exactly. So what does that look like in practice? We think you should combine the critiques of the major monotheisms.
Judaism, Christianity, Islam?
All of them, since they're all tied to guilt and sacrifice and denying the body. Put them into a single major movement.
Give it a title that signals the shift, like the institutionalization of guilt and exchange, something that shows you're moving from land-based cults to systems of abstract debt.
I love that. And then you can use Christian history as a sort of concentrated case study of this process.
Tracing how commercial logic refines religious inhumanity.
Yeah, you traced the line from Yahuwah's sacrifice all the way to the modern Catholic market of sin and indulgences.
And use that brilliant line that's already in the material about the Catholic Church being the first advertising agency to sell heaven on installments.
Yes, that phrase is incredible. It's the perfect bridge. It shows the reader exactly how ritual debt mutated into financial abstraction.
And then the final chapters on ideology and neo-capitalism don't feel like an add-on.
They feel like the inevitable conclusion. The climax of this whole historical process where money finally becomes the true logos, the God money.
It gives the whole piece so much more structural force that clarifies the momentum beautifully. Okay, so let's tackle the third challenge. And this is, maybe, the hardest part, the rhetorical balancing act.
Moving from total destruction to some kind of concrete construction.
Right.
The text's greatest strength is its absolute passionate destruction of the economic and religious world. The language is just searing.
It is. But then the concluding call for a new humanity, a humanity of joy and life.
It needs to be painted with that same radical specificity.
Or else it just feels like another abstract ideal, you know? Another utopia that feels unattainable.
And that's the weakness. The tone is so overwhelmingly focused on negation, on denouncing what's vile and parasitic.
And while the goal is positive, rejecting work, recovering the body's pleasure, the language describing that new reality is, well, it's just less vivid than the language tearing down the old one.
Much less vivid. The liberated future needs to feel as immediate and visceral as the oppression does right now.
And there's that other rhetorical problem too, right?
The absolute tolerance point.
Yeah, it pivots so abruptly at the end to recommending absolute tolerance after chapters of just universal condemnation. It risks seeming
Contradictory or naive. I mean, how do you tear everything down and then just say be tolerant without explaining what that actually looks like in a liberated world?
So the suggestion has to be to amplify those sections about a realized, non-alienated existence.
The critique will be so much more powerful if the reader feels the visceral appeal of the alternative.
They have to feel that the overcoming of religion leads to actual, tangible human flourishing, not just another political program. It has to be about doing more than just rejecting.
Right. We have to move beyond just abstract calls for life. We need concrete examples of what this recovered human creativity looks like.
So, for instance, expand on the positive examples that are already there, but just hinted at.
Like the note on Bach's music, that it's a passion fury and an orgastic melody that just completely overwhelms the banal religious words it's set to.
Yes, that musical energy, that's an example of the kind of intense, sensual force we're talking about.
And to give the reader a real historical example of this kind of refusal, a moment where liberation actually broke through the system.
The story of the Baha'i poet Qurrat al-Ain.
Exactly. In 1848, she tears off her chador in public to declare equality. You have to present that act not just as an anecdote,
but as a concrete, actionable blueprint for what refusal looks like.
Her act wasn't an idea. It was physical, it was shocking, it was total.
It's grounded in the body, and that's the key, right?
That's the key, grounding the positive vision in the body. So those final passionate statements,
The fons vitae, the fountain of youth.
the very source of goodness that man has scorned, you have to use that language to vividly evoke body consciousness, sensual intelligence.
To replace the mechanical logic of what the text calls the tin.
Yeah, for anyone less familiar, the tin is the essay's term for that imposed abstract mind, the cold, calculating, guilt-ridden logic of civilization.
So the ultimate goal is to make it clear we're replacing that cold logic with something immediate, creative, and sensual.
And that makes the final vision feel material and achievable, not just celestial.
Not just another ideology.
So, to just quickly recap, we've dissected this radical critique by focusing on 3 essential areas.
All aimed at making the argument as structurally sound as it is rhetorically destructive.
First, fortifying that foundational anthropological premise.
Right, using hard, quantifiable evidence like the Hadza data and the skeleton analysis to defend the age of abundance as a historical reality, anchoring the whole critique.
Second, refining the structural flow to really maximize the polemic's momentum.
Creating that smooth, escalating transition from agricultural sacrifice to the abstract logic of God money by streamlining those middle sections.
And third, balancing the absolute destruction of the old world with an equally radical and concrete construction of the new.
Amplifying the rhetoric of joy and life with specific, visceral examples of creative energy, physical refusal, and recovering that body consciousness.
We really believe that addressing these points will turn an already searing philosophical essay into something that is truly definitive and structurally unassailable.
For sure, we strongly encourage you to submit the revised material for another round of critique.